One of the biggest conversations we've been having is what will be the impact of artificial intelligence on film? Like, will it replace people? How does technology play a role in the future of film? How will studios use it? I just watched a movie that made me realize that too much technology can actually be bad. And because it offers an escape, it offers it's easy way to sneak out of things, and then that can look techy. When I was in theater watching trailers, Abigail is something that was shown over and over and over and over again. And as someone who's not really a big fan of horror movies, because I'm like, why the hell would I pay money to be scared? Like, that's just not my fetish. That's not something that I wake up and be like, oh, I want to be scared today. Let me go do this. But the way that the trailer was, I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. Watching a movie with vampires. I can't believe the last time that I watched one. I think the last time was probably with Twilight. Like, I think those were the days where vampire movies seemed realistic ish. But until they also started doing some weird stuff. But like, I think the vampire genre is something that is slowly phased out and died down, because one of the things is, how do you just make vampires realistic? Like, how do you tell a story about this thing that sucks people's blood and stuff like that, like, and into an interesting story that people will watch, and I think that has been a big challenge. So when I saw someone trying to do it, you're like, all right, I'll watch you. I'll watch and see what you did. And it's an interesting movie. It's a heist. It's these people steal this girl and from ballet, and they kidnap her, and they have to stay with her for overnight, and then they'll be paid. And I think with such movies, because you're trying to just create a situation in your setup of how we ended up to where we need to end up in the story, it's great. It does what it has to do. But then for me, which is a problem with a lot of these scary movies, is it's very difficult to explain why. Why is this happening? Like, why? When the first character dies, you're like, oh shit, okay. We're in a scary house, in a spooky house, and it's time to be scared, I guess. But then it's the way that the people die. It's the way that things happen. When you're watching a lot of vampire movies, the way people die is the vampire either it destroys the body, it sucks you out of your blood. In this one, it's like the guy's head is chopped off, and you're like, wait, what? Like, what's doing this? And that's it's disturbing because you're in theater and stuff like that. But it's like, oh, cool, I can vibe with this. And then it just starts to become ridiculous. From his death, I think. I don't quite remember which is the next character that dies. I don't think the next person dies. He almost dies. And then they start dropping off one by one. And you're like, okay, fine. I can see what's happening. But the first time that a vampire dies, she doesn't just die. She blows up. And you're like, what in the devil? Like, what's going on? She blows up, and then it's like a pool of black stuff. And then the movie continues, and you're now looking at these vampires going, what the flip? And for me, the acting was amazing. Every character, like, these people played it. The drama worked. It's just the VFX that we're like, huh? Make it make sense. At one point, this guy is stabbed multiple times by a little cross, and he's supposed to be bleeding all over, but he doesn't bleed for some reason. And his death, at the end of it, he's killed by his little friend. But you're like, yo, what the flip? Like, that's my whole thing when I was going through the whole movie, where you're like, what's going on and why? Why hasn't he died? How are these people still living? And in their final setup, in the end, in the third act, it's like things reverse, and a guy is converted into becoming a vampire, and then all of a sudden things have switched. And I'm like, guys, I know you have access to the millions of dollars, you have access to all this, and you're trying to use it, but the basics, let's go back to the basics of filmmaking or story making. It's, what's the story? What are we trying to do? What do the characters want? Why should the audience care? What's the theme? What's all this? And then how do we make it fit in the genre? And what are the genre tropes? What are these things? How do these things work? And that's how we get here. Like, this guy converts into a vampire. We don't really know much history about how these vampires come to be. And the idea is, once you become a vampire, all of a sudden you know everything about vampirism. There's no, you know how in this one, Mystic Falls, what was it called? I'm forgetting the name. But in that, when Elena is 10, like, there's a period of time where she has to learn how to become a vampire. Now, granted, you only have 2 hours, but it's like, how does this caretaker know so much about vampires? How does he know that with your help you can become this crazy monstrous thing? And then you just kill the caretaker, and it's like this character is just there to push the plot forward in terms of what it needs to do, and the story is not really told. And for me, this is very disappointing, because there's a lot of filmmakers that they, including myself, who need budgets to make films, who need the opportunity to do this, and the bar keeps getting set lower and lower by the things that you go and watch. And for me, you're like, yo, why did I come here? Like, why did I? It's not just you wasted your time, you wasted your money, and you're in a theater and you're like, why? You know, at the end of the film, it's like, why? And I get it, like, some people probably loved it, but for me, Abigail reminded me of this other movie. The name is running away from me right now, with the toy, where the toy became this monster. Like, it started out being a sweet doll, but then it becomes weird and crazy. And I think it wasn't Lucy, it was Megan. Yeah, it was Megan. In Megan, that for me is what Abigail is, in a way. Like, they're in the same bracket, but in that one you had a cohesive story that you could follow, and you could understand, like, oh, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. Whereas in this one, you have these vampires that have been living for X amount of time. You have this, and maybe there's one before it, maybe it's a sequel, prequel, I don't know. But for what I watched, it didn't satisfy me. Like, I wasn't satisfied living. And, you know, I think they had, at the end of the day, that budget, they had a decent film. Like, but it's like, come on, we can do so much better. Overall, the cast is great, the acting is great, they work with what they have, the cinematography was amazing, they hid a lot of things, and, you know, they shot, the house looks spooky. In terms of production design, I think they did pretty well. In terms of editing, the pacing was fine. I would argue, like, the final act, that, you know, I don't know, like, if in a 3-act structure, the final act wasn't really convincing. Like, it wasn't hitting the parts that it's supposed to hit. But overall, it's a good film. I mean, I wouldn't go to the theater to watch it, though. I feel like it's a film that I can watch on Netflix and be fine, because it's just not satisfactory. Like, it doesn't satisfy when you watch it. It's like, okay.